So, a lot of you have heard me say, I really, really, really do worry that Starmer could seriously drop the ball. And don't get me wrong, at the moment, he is doing a fantastic job holding Johnson to account in quite Prime Minister's question times. But, and I always say he needs to start putting out policy. Needs to. And yes, I know I'm going to get flooded with, oh no, things might change. He might, the newspapers might take a hit when he changes the policy because maybe he can't do it anymore. The reason he can't do it anymore will because of the Tories have screwed up the economy that bad. That's all he has to say. That's all he has to say or even do. The fact that Labour, since Jeremy Corbyn, have continuously put out fully costed manifestos is a massive big win over the Tories. Because the Tories have constantly said for years, these Labour plans will never work. They're throwing money left, right and centre. Okay, we'll release manifestos that are fully costed. This is how we're going to fund it. This is where the money's going to come from. It silenced the Tory arguments from doing that. Not completely, but all they had to do was say, well, here it is. Where's yours? And I really do worry that Starmer's going to fall short. And I worry that we're going to end up with a hung parliament. And I worry that this could see potentially another Tory DUP alliance. That is a very, very big prediction. But it could potentially happen. Because the DUP are going to be, especially for the next couple of years, agitating constantly to get rid of the Northern Ireland Protocol and even get rid of the Brexit deal completely. And as we've said since this deal came in, if Johnson thinks that it is a political good move for him to do so, then Johnson will gladly pull the plug on the Brexit deal. And it is in the clause that after a year, Johnson could pull the Brexit deal completely, which is what has led to a lot of us speculating that this is why the Brexiteers got behind it. It's why they got behind the withdrawal agreement in the first place. Because, oh, it's all right, we can change it afterwards. When they couldn't, So we're going to get into Labour's election chances. And don't get me wrong, I do want Labour to win the next election, but they have to completely get rid of the Tories to do it. We cannot go through another 10 years of Tory austerity rule. It will just destroy this country even more, but it might lead a lot of people to think maybe the Tory and all these Brexiteers were wrong in what their thinking was, But anyway, let's jump into this article then. So, before we do get into that, please do remember to hit that like and share button. And of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page and a One Off Nation link. And thank you very much to the people who do support me that way. And on into the article then. So, this comes from the New European. And the title is, Progressive Alliance could see Labour win 351 seats at the next election, new analysis reveals. Labour could win up to 351 seats if it teamed up with the Greens and Liberal Democrats at the next general election, a new analysis has revealed. Analysis of a polling figures by a pro-EU lobby group, Best for Britain, showed that Labour would secure just 284 seats at the 2024 elections if it went it alone. This is just 42 seats below the 326 needed to govern with a majority. Reviewing the responses of the 20,000 adults Best for Britain surveyed, said that the Labour Party would find itself in three likely scenarios at the end of the next election. And these scenarios are well well worth talking about, because we need to start thinking about the next election now, because we need desperately, desperately, A, to get rid of the Tories, B, we need to start launching some serious investigations to all this chumocracy that they've got going on, where they've literally handed government contracts to their friends, and there should absolutely be jail sentences for these people that have done so, and if they are still in Parliament, then they ought to be stripped of their MP status and another election held, because quite frankly, they should never be allowed to hold public office ever again. As well as numerous other things like reforming our democracy completely. The Tories are not going to do that under their watch, especially with such a large majority that they command. In fact, if they were to come a reforming of the electoral system, ultimately the Tories would find some way to try and skew it in their favour. And because they have such a large majority, no one could stop them from doing so, which again, something we have to be conscious of. So, it showed that without a pact, Labour would only win 283 seats and the Conservatives 284, leaving both parties having to form a coalition to govern. So, already we're looking at the 2024 parliamentary election being a potential hung parliament, which is what one of my worries is. So, in this scenario, Labour would pick up 35 seats across the North and Midlands that were lost in 2019, and see Boris Johnson lose his Uxbridge seat, along with cabinet ministers Alok Sharma, Robert Buckland and Alistair Jack. Under scenario B, which sees Nigel Farage's Reform Party stand down, the Conservatives would win 319 seats, and Labour just 251. Johnson would retain his seat, while Starmer and Jack would lose theirs. But under a scenario that sees Labour work with the Greens and the Lib Dems, and Farage's party bow out, well, again, that's a big if, the party would win 146 more seats than the Conservatives. Dubbed Scenario C, Labour would pick up 39 seats across the North and the Midlands lost in the 2019 elections, while almost entirely rebuilding the Red Wall. Meanwhile, Johnson would lose his seat along with the cabinet ministers Dominic Raab, George Eustice, Grant Shapps, Simon Hunt, as well as Starmer, Jack and Buckland. Best for Britain CEO Naomi Smith said that the analysis shows Labour needed the support of other parties to make a return to government in 2042. Smith said Labour has done well to rebuild since last year's election collapse, but things as they stand they will need the support of other parties to make a return to government in 2042. This reliance is even clearer when you add Nigel Farage's Reform UK party into the picture. Previous iterations, which have stood aside for Conservative candidates over the last two elections, have shown a nativist unity. If Keir Starmer wants a shot at number 10 in 3 years, the party must open up to working with the Greens and Lib Dems, particularly given the impending constituency boundary changes and SMT strength north of the border. Peter Dumfries, who heads up the Unite to Reform, a group that's set up to promote alliances between progressive parties, said the recent lesson from the US is that populist nationalism can be defeated, even under a first-past-the-post system, but only through unified action by the all progressives of the centre and the left. In the UK, exactly the same applies, and this polling demonstrates that Labour cannot win by itself. But it also shows that working together, progressives can defeat the Conservatives, and that is the aim of the next general election. It is time all of the parties of the centre and the left in the UK to find ways to work together and make this possible. Labour must support electoral reform. Nigel Farage will cause trouble for the Conservative Party, but he will never act in a way that risks them losing power. For as long as Labour, the Greens and the Liberal Democrats are conflicted, they will be outmanoeuvred. This comes after Keir Starmer was urged to lead a cross-party progressive alliance to reform UK politics in the wake of Brexit. Stephen Dorrell, the chair of the European Movement, a grassroots group focused on promoting close ties between the UK and Europe, said the first past the post system of voting allowed a small clique around Boris Johnson to impose its will on the rest of the UK. In an open letter to the leader, published in The Independent, he told Sir Keir Starmer, "It was time to rise above your legitimate concerns as leader of the Labour Party and take on the mantle of national leadership as leader of the opposition by building a broad movement to deliver new politics." Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. We need drastic electoral reform. And it's going to be interesting going forward, and especially up to the next general election, how much of a big issue that becomes. And like I say on this channel, I will absolutely 100% promote reforming this. So if you are wanting to reform UK politics, then I ultimately recommend going and either joining one of these two groups or, keeping a close eye on what these two groups do. So first of all is Labour for PR. Again, fantastic website, explains all about proportional representations, and even dispels some of the big myths around PR. The other one is the Electoral Reform Society. Fantastic group, constantly making amazing arguments for pushing for electoral reform in our government, and not just the House of Parliament and House of Lords, in other areas as well. Two fantastic organisations that you should absolutely go forward and support. And with that said, as always, thanks for watching. Please do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And of course, down below, there is a link to my Patreon page and one-off donation link. And thank you very much to everyone who watched. And as always, we'll see you all next time.